Here we go for study 3, and going to give you the answer for study 2 for the questions that come from verse 9 to 11 and really from verse 1 to 11. But we're going to give you some answers to those. The first question was things about Paul's prayer. So what did you notice about Paul's prayer? And from verse 3 to verse 11. And well, first of all, he's always praying. So he's praying all the time, which is good. He's praying for all of them, so it's not just his favorites. He's like, I pray for all of you. He prays with joy and thanksgiving for them, so that's a really good attitude to have when we're praying for somebody, is to be full of joy and thanksgiving. He prays with confidence for them. See that in verse 6. He's praying, but he is confident that God is going to continue to work in their lives. He prays with love for them, and I just love verse 8 when it talks about this yearning for them. And this real affection that he has for the other believers. This isn't just an intellectual faith. This is a faith that involves both our mind and our emotions. And Paul longs for them. With Christ's love in him, he longs for them. It's very beautiful. So what has God done in verse 1 to 11? There's a few things, and actually a few people wrote in and found even more. And but here's 10 to work through. So first of all, what Jesus has done. He allows us to serve him and serve each other, verse 1. And you're like, well, that's not good, but that's a beautiful thing, that we have purpose, that we have meaning in being in him and being allowed to serve him and serve others. He makes us saints, verse 1, so he makes us the holy ones. Verse 2, he gives us grace. Verse 6, he's coming again for us. Verse 8, he gives us love for one another. So my love for you and my love for other believers isn't based on me. It's actually based on Christ loving them through me. It's very encouraging and beautiful to know. And he makes us fruitful in verse 11. The Father has adopted us in verse 2. He hears our prayers. Obviously, Paul's praying. Verse 3 to 11. He has begun a work of grace in us as Christians, verse 6. And he will complete that work in us in verse 6 as well. What does Paul pray then? This is quite a powerful prayer. And I really encourage you to dig down into this prayer even more than you've done so far. I think it's so important. Well, he prays, first step, that their love would grow in knowledge and insight. That their love would grow in knowledge and insight. I encourage you to read 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 12. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 9 to 10. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 3. And 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 22. So again, I'd encourage you to pause the video and go and read those verses, and you'll see this is a theme of the New Testament, love growing. He prays then that love would grow in knowledge and insight. That's step 1. And that would lead to them making better choices. That's step 2. So that love and this love that's growing would lead to them making better choices is step 2. In every scenario, in every situation. Then step 3, that will lead to them living a blameless life before the world. The world would see them make excellent choices, make the best decision that's glorifying to God, that's serving other people, that's a blessing to the world around them. So they would live a blameless life in the world. Number 4, this would lead to a life that is filled with Christ-likeness. And just bearing in mind that it's not you having fruit, it's Christ in you producing that fruit. And you'll see that if you really dig down deep into those verses, verse 9 to 11. It's through Christ, it's Christ in us, that we be full of Christ-likeness. Ephesians calls it the fruit of light. Galatians calls it the fruit of the Spirit. And Philippians calls it the fruit of righteousness. And then number 5, that this would lead to God being glorified and being praised. And I would encourage you to go and read John chapter 15, verse 8 to see that same theme as well. Now we have questions for study 3, and we'd encourage you to read verse 12 to verse 18. So stop, pause, and go read verse 12 to verse 18. Now Paul is in prison, and the Philippians are concerned about his physical and emotional welfare, of course, naturally. They're concerned about how the gospel would stop spreading. They are praying for Paul. We see that in chapter 1, verse 19. And they sent one of their own with a financial gift to provide for Paul's needs while he's in prison. You can see that in chapter 2, verse 25 to 30, and chapter 4, verse 10 to 18. So pause that, go read those, so that you're understanding where we're coming from here. Now, Paul is brimming with confidence throughout this letter. And the question is, how can you sit in prison and have joy and confidence? Well, Paul has a lot to say about this as the letter to the Philippians continues. But for now, we're in verse 12 to 18 of chapter 1. So here's the questions. Question 1, Paul talks about his bonds or his chains 3 times in this section. So what do you notice about them in each case? What 3 things have his bonds led to? Question 2, what is his attitude toward those who are trying to... question 2 is, what is his attitude toward his suffering in this passage? So what is his attitude toward suffering in this passage? And question 3 is, what is his attitude toward those who are trying to hurt him? So there's people, as you read verse 12 to 18, who are actually trying to make his life harder. So read through that passage and see what is his attitude towards those people who are trying to make his life harder. And then I want to leave you with a question to meditate on. So I'm not going to give you an answer to this question in the next study, but I want you to meditate through this for yourself. And it's this: how does Paul's attitude and perspective toward his suffering and difficulties challenge our attitude and perspective towards our own? I'm going to ask that again. How does Paul's attitude and perspective towards his suffering and difficulties challenge our own attitude and perspective toward ours?